Ciao! Good to see you all. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Venice. I'm sure you have heard of me. You know, ancient Italian city, built on canals, full of gondolas. Rather beautiful, though I say it myself. You're less likely to know that I am an IT pioneer. I can say with confidence that in the few years leading up to now, that's 2030, I've become a world leader in integrated payments. I'll tell you more in a moment.
So, good morning, everyone. Now, I know most of you are here because there was Venice in the title, right? Okay, it's a no judgment zone, that's fine. But whatever your reason for coming here, I hope that personification of Venice grabbed your attention. And I'm really excited today to take you on a bit of a journey, some fact and some futuristic, about how payments and data together can really deliver an integrated customer experience. And that we will see a lot of Venice along the way as well. So sit back, relax. Now, the first question is, well, why Venice? And why Venice? Because it really optimizes some of the challenges and opportunities that cities will face in the future. Ancient city, incredibly beautiful, millions of tourists, and lots of challenges in terms of its topography. And more importantly, and more personally, Elavon, together with our partners, Visa, and our system integrator partners, have been in Venice for a few years now, really looking at how we can revolutionize the city and the transit journey there. Now, our role in society and business as a payments company is quite simple. It's about making paying for things easier, simpler, and more convenient. And it's really wonderful to have Venice here today to show how it can all work in real life.
It's great to be here.
Thank you. Now, Venice is talking to us from the future, 2030 to be exact. But really, the smart, sustainable city of tomorrow is actually here with us today. And it's here with us in a certain shape, in a certain form. And as I mentioned, the opportunities to bring those elements together to really provide a connected journey. And our challenge in smart cities and really creating smarter societies is not necessarily the existence of technology. Some of this technology, in fact, a lot of it does exist, but it's about spreading it more widely and more evenly. And the underpinning to all of this is actually data. And over the last 20 years, we've noticed as consumers just how much data we generate, both as consumers and as businesses that are actually working with other businesses to use that data. And we trust some of our very important functions, like banking. We use more and more data in that today. And the data in itself is not really interesting, but when you start actually mapping those data sets and connecting those data sets, that's the opportunity, again, to develop those experiences that are truly enriching and different for consumers, and more convenient. And that's what, essentially, the journey today will show you. And just adding the sustainability element to it, I think one of the things that's personally really exciting and fascinating is you can learn not just what you paid for something or how much you paid for something, but you can actually see your carbon footprint. You can see the impact that your choices will have on that particular city. And that's the reason why, again, we've talked about this idea of smart cities, because the decisions you make on transit, whether you drive or you take a train, whether you use a fuel vehicle or an EV-powered vehicle, and whether you are paying for your gondola ride with contactless, those decisions and that data that gets generated can have a really meaningful impact on how a city like Venice is able to then become smarter, more efficient, and more sustainable in the future.
She is right. I've been using biometrics to let tourists pay for gondola riders with their eyes. I've got rid of congestion by charging automatically for parking and road use. When people go into my museum, shops and restaurants, they don't have to pay. Well, they do, but it happens without anyone having to stop and sort it out. It's easier for visitors, better for the environment, and more efficient for me.
Now, a city like Venice, again, you look at an ancient city, and it is remarkable to think about how progressive it actually is. That work of starting to think about this future state has happened now. And again, since we're talking in 2030, really the whole 2020s have been about making this vision a reality. And so instead of paying for things and really thinking about that payment experience, what you have is a series of embedded and connected experience powered by data that actually help you really get on with the things you want to do instead of really thinking about the friction that you're going through. And the same goes for utilities as well. So Venice integrates payments with municipal services. And again, if any of you are visiting, you'll start to see the beginnings of this already in place. You heard a little bit about Venice talking about what happens in a museum, and it's really what happens behind it. It's when someone enters a station or a museum and pays with a biometric technology like facial recognition. What actually sits behind that interaction is a lot of data on identity, age, verification, and available funds that actually then authorize that transaction. So something that simple and seamless, which is what our customers are asking for, is actually supported by an incredible amount of complexity in the background, both, again, in terms of data and in terms of technology. And each of these experiences now actually generate more data. So you can imagine, if you're a repeat visitor to a museum, wouldn't the city want to know? Wouldn't it want to tell you, hey, have you considered going to the coffee shop in the museum? Did you think about how you got here? Maybe, if you had taken a public transit, here's, €5 off. Or whatever it is, it helps a city get a much more bird's eye view on what's actually happening. Traffic patterns, shopping patterns, consumer patterns, tourist patterns. And that, again, helps a city like Venice with access to that data and insight make much smarter decisions. One of these areas where it's really coming to life is EV, around electric vehicle charging payments.
Let me tell you about EVs, electric vehicles. I'm surrounded by them. A lot are driverless, autonomous. The streets and structure on the outside of my city have loads of charging points, naturally. No one wastes his time sorting out payment. They just recharge and go. That's because paying for transport, retail, leisure and so on isn't done separately. It's done automatically. It's just part of the system. Put simply, payments are built in.
So once again, you see this idea of integration, the idea of payments, data, and I think, Bas, as you'll be talking about in your session, actually standards as well, the importance of that, because we're talking about sharing data, we're talking about data sets that are generated by different interactions. But again, payments as the sort of common backbone can really help drive that seamless embedded experience. So let me take you a little bit more about an actual consumer journey and what that could look like. Now, again, bear with me, because there'll be some fact, some future here. But again, it's to give you an idea, and hopefully when you leave this session, you'll have a little bit of an inspiration of what the future could look like. And again, the future is a lot closer than we all think. So it's 2030, and I'm heading to visit my old friend Venice, or rather, my cutting-edge friend Venice. I get a glass of wine on the train, and very flatteringly, they ask me to prove my age. Now, I definitely don't look 18, but let's just go with the story. Now, the attendance technology actually automatically reads the identity off of my phone's digital wallet. So that's enabled through data sharing from the phone's digital wallet to the technology that the attendant has. And what that means is that the attendant can essentially, have proof of my age without embarrassing shows of passports or driver's licenses and so on. Now, this is quite a simple interaction. We're only talking about embarrassment here. But if you actually think about it more seriously and you think about what it could do for disabled users who might need special services, there are ways to incorporate a lot of information on digital identity into wallets, and then the data sharing of that technology will make a lot of those experiences more seamless. So essentially, I get my glass of wine, the payment is instant, I almost don't notice it, it's all done via my digital wallet. At this point, again, I have a choice. I can choose to pay in my local currency, or I can choose to pay in my home currency. That's called dynamic currency conversion. And again, that's a customer choice, very easy to integrate into a seamless experience of payment. And that's it. I have my glass of wine, and I'm on my way. So I arrive in Venice, I'm quite refreshed, and now I think about how do I want to get to my hotel. First thing I do is I look up what my options are. And this is where Venice really shows its intelligence. It's not just simply a matter of saying you can get from point A to point B in a matter of 10 minutes, but it gives me the options: train, bus, tram, gondola, air. And not only that, it actually gives me options with my carbon footprint included. So I'm now a much smarter consumer. I'm now able to make a decision on sustainability as part of my payment or my consumer decision. It isn't a separate step that I need to take.
You are used to dynamic sat-navs, right? But these days, the tech is so much more sophisticated. I crunch through mountains of real-time data every second. It gives me a bird's-eye view of everyone and everything, from passengers' numbers arriving on planes to parking capacity in garages. It's like I can see everyone as an organic part of me, Venice. Millions of people interactive in real time. Every millisecond, I use my data-driven insights to rebalance traffic flows and steer people past problems. For the first time, I feel like I'm in control.
Now, when I arrive at the hotel, I get out of my EV. So let's say I used an electric vehicle taxi to get to the hotel. Now, I already have an account with the taxi company, so the payment is charged automatically, and I'm able to just get out. Now, we're used to this experience actually today. I know many of you will have this experience. You can also, with the delegated authority functionality on the wallet, you can also set limits to how much, to what transaction amount you'd be comfortable for the payment to happen seamlessly. And now I get off at the hotel, and the EV car drives off happily. Remember, this is an autonomous EV vehicle. And what does it do next? Well, it knows immediately what the closest charging station is where it can recharge itself. That's, again, smart data that's connected to the dash of the car. And the EV itself has an automated digital wallet built in. In fact, the same technology as the consumer would use. And this enables that recharging and the payment, again, to happen in an embedded way automatically. And just as I enter the reception of the hotel, I get a ping on my phone with a digital receipt of the journey that I took, not only with the price, but also with my carbon footprint included.
As a city, I've become used to chaos. In the last 1,000 years, I've witnessed endless battles, constant development, and now millions of tourists. You know how it is. You develop structures and systems over time, but they don't talk to each other. And that's okay. When you are built on water, you get used to problems. But I knew there was a better way, so I got Elavon to work with my people to tie everything together via big data. And now I can see the big picture. I can link boats and ferries with buses and trams. By directing people movement efficiently, I've replaced the bottlenecks and traffic jams with free-flowing public spaces. And everyone who visits gets a better experience without having to worry about how to pay. Who'd have thought ancient old me would be so futuristic?
Of course, we had to have a plug for Elavon in there. But it is important to note that this isn't actually just about Elavon. It actually really does take a network of partners, many of whom are here in the room, to actually make this a reality. Anyway, I get into the hotel, and to check in, it's all self-serve, of course, biometric recognition, facial authentication. The hotel sends my room number and key to my phone, and so I don't have to stop anywhere, go to the lift, I'm checked in, and I'm good to go. And then I get ready for a good night's sleep, because in the morning I'm going to explore Venice. Now, I want to see as much of this progressive Venice as I can, so I want to use a combination of different methods to get around: gondola, tram, bus. And again, what's great, and the technology that exists today, if any of you have visited, is the enablement of contactless payments. It really has changed the game in terms of providing options of public transit, and of course that reduces congestion and traffic, which is critical in a city like Venice. I track the progress on my phone to check that the amounts I'm paying each time are accurate. So again, these are pinged to my phone. I can see my carbon footprint. Now, my watch is monitoring my progress and tells me I'm running low on energy. So it's time to get some coffee and a treat. Now it's linked to my health data, so it knows I need a rest. So I go to a coffee shop. Of course, the phone shows me the way. Closest coffee shop, there's an offer. Now they automatically know what my preferred coffee and treat are, and so when I get there, it's all ready and waiting for me. Again, there's another data set that's getting shared here in terms of loyalty, my customer preferences, my health data, all governed by customer consent, of course, but it shows again that if you choose to link these data sets, that's the art of the possible.
Clever, no? That's why these days they call me Venice, the smart city. I'm making life ultra convenient in so many ways, but one of the most exciting is integrated payments. Thanks to real-time data, instant analysis, open banking, and proper encrypted security, the people who visit me get far more than culture and beauty. They get to pay for everything without even thinking about it.
Now, of course, Venice mentioned security, but security is incredibly important. And again, we've seen the startings of the technologies that make these experiences a lot easier. We have transaction risk analysis, which is a tool from Elavon that obviously helps score the risk real-time of each transaction. And that means getting exemptions from SCA when the transaction qualifies. Whereas for larger sums of money, which is not a low-risk or a low-value transaction, it's backed by cryptography, which helps us ensure that we have the right picture of fraud of any events. So that's really what 2030 could be like. Less hassle, more convenience, all supported by integrated payments and embedded data. You've all seen the vision, and now obviously it's the integration that will help make this happen. And I'm really confident that with the ecosystem efforts, both around payments technologies, integration, backed by data, consumer consent, the right security protocols, this is a vision that is, that will very much be a reality. And I do believe as consumers, it's something that we're all, aching for. And for me personally, what I'm passionate about, the carrot on the cherry on top, is we can now finally have sustainability embedded into our everyday choices and decisions that we make. So thank you for your time.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's hard to see you, everyone. All right. I made my way here yesterday from our office in Amsterdam. And traveling to Berlin and getting to the venue, I had to make 4 different transactions that you can see on the screen here. I took my car and I drove to the airport, Schiphol Airport. I had to fuel up. I had to get my car. I had to pay. I had to park my car, which was yet another transaction. I bought a bottle of water at the airport, and I paid in the taxi on my way back here to the venue. And the point of my presentation here today, and why I'm here today, is very much in line with the previous presentation, is that actually none of these transactions would have been necessary. All of this could have been fully automated, fully autonomous, if you will, which would have reduced friction and had many more benefits in terms of data sharing, advancing of transactions, and the like. That's why I'm here today, and that's what I'm here to talk with you about. My name is Bas van Donselaar. I lead the consultancy team at PaymentGenes. We're a payments services company based in Amsterdam. And my message today is that we can unlock many, many, many new use cases with IoT if we facilitate a new kind of transactions in the way we process transactions. I've called them machine-initiated transactions because I think it's a fun name, but that's not the point entirely. It is the point that there's a massive opportunity here, and that's what we'll be talking about. Very much in line with the previous presentation, but coming from a completely different point. I think there's a lot of inspiration here, and I'm hoping to stretch your imagination of what's possible and what the future could look like. There's 3 main takeaways I'd like to share with you. One is IoT is already everywhere, and transaction-capable devices are already everywhere. It doesn't have to be 2030. It could be today if we take the right actions. Secondly, when we're zooming in onto smart cities and mobility, we see a lot of use cases already where tangible value is created every day based on solutions that are live in the market. And third, if we want to stretch out, if we want to grow this sort of business, if we want to grow these opportunities, including efficiency, but also including sustainability, we need a new kind of transactions that we as an ecosystem need to talk about. And I can see there's a fairly small group of people in the room today, so I think the second half of hour we can have a nice discussion about it, and I would very much welcome to hear other opinions as well, right? This is just our vision. We need to talk about this as an ecosystem, and that's why we're here in Berlin. All right, so let's get started. So IoT, when I talk about IoT and when I did a few interviews before I did this presentation, everybody starts talking about a fridge. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the self-ordering fridge, Samsung actually launched one in 2016. You can still buy it if you want to. They partnered with MasterCard. I'm not sure if they're in the room. They partnered with MasterCard to enable the fridge to order your own groceries. Brilliant. I don't have one, but brilliant. But it actually, IoT started a way longer time ago. Sorry for the bad quality of the picture, but it was 1982. You can see it from the computers on the right-hand side. We don't have those anymore. This is the first IoT device that was ever connected to a network that was openly accessible. It was built by students at a university in the US. They connected the Coke fridge on the left-hand side with a network. It was pre-internet, if I'm not mistaken. They connected it to a network to check if there was Coke and if the Coke was cold. So you could exit it anywhere and you could check if your Coke was available. 40 years ago, the machine is actually a bit older than I am. 40 years ago, this was the first device, and look where we are today. There's many examples of IoT being used in different use cases today. I just want to highlight 3 to understand how IoT penetrated our life invisibly or without us being aware of it. First of all, Uber. Uber uses the GPS location that a driver has, of the driver's smartphone, to locate where the Uber is driving, and they use this to actually calculate the fare, to calculate the ticket length, the trip length, etc. Very simple use case. Decathlon, the retailer, they use RFID tags on their clothing to check the shipment of clothing throughout the value chain and to assure that you don't walk out the shop without paying. They also use it for checkout as well. So it's a very important IoT application in retail. And these RFID tags could also play a massive role in cashier-less shopping, for example. And third, QPark. It's a parking provider. They use smart cameras to calculate the ticket price for a parking session. So this data is used to calculate how long you've been in a certain area, calculate the price, and ultimately also do the ticketing for the parking. It's very simple use cases, but it's the beginning of a network of devices that could be connected and that can really facilitate new journeys. So what is IoT? Obviously, there are hundreds of definitions out there, but the simplest thing is it's a device that has sensors and that's connected to the internet. There are way more complicated definitions, but I'll spare you those. But a device that has software, it has sensors, and it has internet connectivity. And actually, all the payments devices that we know, or most of the payments devices that we know, are actually IoT devices. Think about a terminal to accept card payments, an MPOS terminal, an ATM. Think about even validators in public transport. They're all IoT devices that are built and designed to facilitate transactions. But there's so many more IoT devices. Think about the car, for example, a connected car. Think about gates for public transport, validators, toll gates, but also, for example, smart cameras. Think about the navigation pane in your car. All IoT devices, obviously, I cannot give you a complete list, but all of the devices shown here could also, in the right framework, with the right security measures and boundaries in place, could also initiate a transaction that's entirely seamless, that's embedded, and that doesn't require any human intervention. You already spoke about it for a bit. There's many, many connected devices in the world. There's about 20 billion today, expected to grow to 30 billion by 2030. And the number of IoT devices that are not laptops, smartphones, or iPads has now by far actually outgrown those devices that we use every day for their connectivity. So most people own more IoT devices than they're aware of, and they own more IoT devices than they own their regular connected devices they use every day. And these IoT devices are super important for smart cities, as Hemlata already explained. About a quarter of all the devices are used in smart city settings, and also don't overlook the 7% that are actually used for smart cars. So in a lot of use cases in mobility and in smart cities, IoT is crucially important. So I've explained IoT, it's everywhere. And secondly, if we really zoom into mobility, I think there's a few very relevant use cases that are live today. Sometimes they're broadly deployed, others are more niche and still need to be developed across markets. There's 3 I want to highlight. Plug and charge, which has to do with EV charging. Secondly, geolocation ticketing, which has to do with charging for public transport. And third, road pricing, crucially important to manage congestions in our growing cities. Plug and charge is a system that allows a plug and a socket on an EV vehicle to connect and exchange information. They exchange information, so the right energy load is applied, but they also exchange billing information and pricing information, for example. So the connection between these 2 devices makes it possible to bill the right amount of money to the right user at the right time. It's very nascent, not all cars are capable, but it does enable future use cases, and it enables sort of embedded payments and embedded charging sessions. Secondly, geolocation ticketing. In this case, the geolocation data or the GPS data of a smartphone is used to determine the ticket price for a certain public transport trip for a rider. So suppose you check in a bus, you don't have to do anything, but your location is recognized by your smartphone entering the bus. Your location is tracked during the bus ride. Once you leave the bus, you're automatically checked out because it's recognized that you're no longer in the bus, and the trip fare is automatically calculated. Completely seamless, completely embedded. This is live in, I think, 5 European countries right now. So it's not the future, but it's tangible value being delivered today. It's seamless, but it also reduces the amount of hardware that's, for example, needed in public transport. And third, road pricing. This is a picture from Singapore, the ERP system, and actually their road pricing means that using a road at a certain time blocks is charged extra because you want to manage congestion, you want to reduce traffic during rush hour. Here in this particular example in Singapore, it means that you have these big gates and every car has a certain custom device in it that's recognized when you pass through the gate. There's a stored value card in the device and you get automatically charged for using this. Completely seamless, completely embedded. And actually, if we look at the structure of these use cases, there is a consistent similar structure coming back on what is needed to facilitate IoT-enabled autonomous transactions. There is sensor data, there's some sort of consent or a light contract between the provider and the user, there's some sort of authorization, and there's a payment. And I want to stop at the last point, because the payment is particularly interesting. Because in 2 out of the 3 cases that I just showed you, the transaction doesn't actually trigger an immediate payment. So there's no immediate automated payment, but rather the transaction is registered, and either at the end of the day or the end of the week, all the transactions are billed to the customer, either through direct debit or a card on file. And this is also one of the challenges that's faced with IoT. And these are just a few examples of what's possible today, but actually there's so much more. Think about automated replenishment. So we bring back the automated fridge again, but there's so many more things that you can think about where replenishment and ordering is automated. Or think about the whole sharing economy. Think about pay-per-use models, car sharing. Think about parking. It's also a pay-per-use model where a sensor can sense how much is used, and immediately a transaction can be initiated, embedded, and charged. Cashless shopping in retail, and also all kinds of upgrades, updates, etc. Also, when you look at the structure of these use cases, there's 3 benefits that consistently come back. It's one, it's instant, right? So it immediately happens. Secondly, it's frictionless. Well, it can't be more frictionless, right? Because it's fully automated. The third, and this is very important, sensor or IoT-initiated transactions can also be data-rich. Sensors capture data, and they can embed that data in transactions. And this can lead to enhanced authorization, enhanced reconciliation. Just as examples, think about how fuel cards work, for example, and how level 3 data is embedded in fuel cards. In a very similar way, IoT payments could be facilitated as well. However, there's also challenges. The payments in all the use cases we showed, it's asynchronous. It means you're not actually paying at the time of the transaction. This brings risks, of course, and something that needs to be solved for. Secondly, level 3 data is particularly hard to embed in actual transactions. Of course, you can share this among data networks, etc. But embedding the actual data in transactions is challenging. And third, all of the examples we showed require some sort of upfront consent. You can't just walk into the store today and walk out with the stuff you want to buy. Up front, you need to enroll. You need to have some sort of consent of contract before you can actually start having this very seamless experience. And in our view, and here we're trying to stretch the imagination a bit, and I'd like to engage in the discussion afterwards as well. In our view, this requires a third transaction category that we do not know today within payments, right? Today, we have two typical transaction categories, right? We have cardholder-initiated transactions, and we have merchant-initiated transactions. I think I'm talking to a room full of payment people, so I'm not going to explain the difference between cardholder-initiated and merchant-initiated transactions. I think we all know that, right? But what we like to argue, and what we like to stretch our imagination, there's a third category, actually. And that's where an IoT device initiates a transaction. This is different because there's no person keying in an account or approving a transaction, but it's also not a merchant that can freely initiate a certain transaction. It's actually a trusted device that within certain guarantees, within certain approvals, and within certain frameworks can actually initiate transactions on your behalf. Additionally, creating such a framework would also enable the embedding of more data, of more level 3 data and more sensor data in transactions to leverage that data in authorization, but also in reconciliation of transactions, and as such enhance the cardholder experience. So it sounds pretty abstract and it's pretty conceptual, right? So how can we get started with this? There's actually 3 calls I'd like to make. First of all, I think it's very important that we as an ecosystem have a dialogue about this. This is our vision, this is our opinion, right? There are probably more opinion, there are probably more visions. So we need to have the discussion to really drill down, unravel the complexity, think about what's the opportunity, but also what's the risk here and what path are we sending ourselves on. Secondly, it's all about customers in the end, right? So we don't want to create a certain transaction category for the sake of creating a transaction category. We want to solve real-world problems, real-world customer problems. So engage with your customers, look at what their businesses are like, look at their business models, and see how this kind of thinking could help them. And third, pilot new use cases. We can all think about it, we can all talk about it, but it's crucially important to actually go out there, just as Elavon has done, and pilot new use cases and new interactions. To wrap it up, I asked AI to create an image of what the future would look like. I felt it was the right timing to do that. If you look crucially at the picture, you see that AI is not there yet entirely. We have a flying bag, for example, in the picture, so it needs a bit of work to really get there. But why I added this is I'd like to think about the possibilities that technology can bring even in a relatively short time. 1.5 years ago, no one of us had probably heard about generative AI. None of us was probably using generative AI. And in a year, 1.5 year time, this has been common ground. All consultancy companies are publishing about it. I hope all your companies are working about how we can use generative AI. And this sort of acceleration of technology and acceleration of change, in my opinion, could also happen in the space of IoT and could also happen in the space of IoT-initiated payments. So I hope in 5 years' time, but I hope I'm here again, that we can talk about the same topic and I can tell you how I parked my car, how I fueled up my car, how I bought a sandwich at the airport, and how I paid a taxi driver without ever taking my card out of my pocket and without ever using my smartphone, but fully embedded and fully autonomous, powered by IoT. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Hemlata and Bas, for 2 very comprehensive perspectives and fascinating, I think, use cases of what is possible today and what is going to be possible in the near future. We are talking about 5 years, not that far. So I would like now to invite Hemlata to come back to join us in the panel, as well as Pike from the Fun Engagement Group. and Andrew Vorster from the banking scene. Thank you. All right. I would love to see a slide of questions from the audience, but I think to warm us up, I would like to start with one. Let's make it as interactive as possible, and I would love to see a debate here, because I think that's what makes the experience of the audience and for us as well richer. So achieving this vision of smart, connected cities will require the collaboration of various parts, governments, utility providers, PSPs, and others. How do you see this working, and to what extent are we already seeing it? Yeah. Do you want to start, Hemlata?
It's a great question. I think it's the point. It's the thing that will cause the leap between where we are today and where we go. Because, as we said, the simpler the experience, actually, the more complex the interactions at the back, and that does require a number of partners to work together. So I think what we have today, which you would have seen in both our references this morning, is you've got elements of the experience that are automated. So for instance, facial recognition for a hotel at check-in and getting your, room key on the phone, that is sort of, you've seen some automation there. You go to the room, one of the things we're piloting, for instance, is a voice-automated ordering. So your room service, you speak to a device, you get it, and then the payment is charged automatically. It goes to your bill, no signing, no check, nothing like that. So I think elements have been automated, but absolutely, I think the consent point, the point about technical integrators, that is a very real issue. And I think it does take, I always believe in starting small, so I think you take some of these elements of the customer journey. That has to be the guiding force. You need the North Star for where you want the customer journey to go. And then I think it's about automating pieces of it through pilots, through innovative partnerships, and I think that's why Venice was sort of a good use case to kind of throw up today, because that's where we're starting to see some of that piloting happen. But Paul, I know when we chatted earlier, you said there's still so much friction in the festival area.
Yes, my world is the live entertainment world, particularly greenfield festivals. And I guess we're the poor relation, because until COVID, cash dominated payments, and it's only really been subsequent to COVID that we've been able to bring contactless, particularly into the world of green fields. The big problem we have, or the industry has, and I think it's pretty well worldwide, is that there's no direct relationship between the promoter and the people who are attending an event. The way that the business has developed over the years is very siloed. You have ticketing companies, you have catering companies, all individual, all using different technologies, and if they are using technology at all, none of it talks to each other. And so we believe that there's a massive opportunity now to bring technology, and particularly the fact that we've got a live direct channel with everyone, potentially through the growth of smartphones, we can actually communicate with individuals, and providing it's consensual, it's secure, etc., and it's worthwhile for the individual, then there's a whole new area of revenue generation that can be developed for festival owners, and also make life much better for brands that they want to engage with, and also the consumers who actually attend these events. It seems ridiculous to me that, for instance, I'll give you an example. I was talking at a festival organisation conference the other week, and a small a promoter of a very small jazz festival in mid-Wales. She only has 400 people, but she got it straight away, and she said that she has no idea if people come to her event or have been to her event for the first time or second time, third time, and if she did, maybe she could do a deal with a local hotel and get them a discount. And you start to use a relationship to develop things like incentives. And I see this all the time with commercial partners who even You know, the large promoters like Live Nation are still reliant on agencies to do the implementation and the activation on site. Seems crazy. So this is where I think the whole areas of technology that Hemlata was talking about starts to potentially look very interesting for our world.
Very good, fascinating.
Yeah, and I would say that events are a very nice sort of small, closed ecosystem to pilot these kind of things, and you would expect next generation innovation to happen first there.
Yeah, you'd think that. Unfortunately, there's quite a lot of politics in our world, and a lot of agencies come unstuck because they think they can walk into a field of a festival and do whatever they like, and suddenly they're up against the fact you can't do this, you can't connect here. You know, we're not fully connected. I mean, we've got over the initial connectivity problems of payment. That's pretty well standard now. And people like Live Nation, all their festivals are cashless. The independent sector is now moving to a completely cashless environment, which has benefits, obviously, for the promoter because they can understand the value of their estate, which is very important to them in this kind of cost. You know, they have a lot of attention on costs. But we are way behind. You know, we expect people who come into our events to do something completely different to the way they behave in normal life.
So,
Andrew.
Carmela, interestingly, you were talking about collaboration, government organizations, things like that, the whole ecosystem around payments and how it all plays together with smart cities. I was interviewing the CIO of the Transit Authority for Milan, and he has a problem with cars, whether they're EVs or not. Milan's got too many of them. In the city, they've got over 20 million commuters into the city each year. 1 million of those journeys are done just during the Milan Fashion Week. So he hates the fact that Milan is congested, and they are looking at payments and payments data to see how they can get people out their cars. So they are looking at how can we change people's user behavior. So they did a survey, and they found out that approximately 40% by their sample of the people use their car out of sheer convenience because of, sorry, and I'm going to sound like I'm attacking both of you here. I'm just being controversial. Because of the unknown cost of the commute. So, Hemlata, you were talking about, oh, it's all seamless as you go through, and your phone's going to ping, oh, you've just been charged so much for this, you've been just... And to the average commuter, they go, what? I don't know how much I'm going to pay. Let me just get in my car. I know how much that's going to cost me. So they're looking at collaborating with all of the transit providers and coming up with a unified ticketing system. Now, I'm sure that if anybody's working in mobility, WIM in Helsinki, the WIM app is the gold standard. It's unified ticketing or unified cost across every single form of transport in Helsinki. E-bikes, bicycles, tram, bus, train, even taxis. And what they've done is they've come up with a fare cap. Now, that's been a hell of a collaboration required because there are multiple different operators, all with their own agendas, all trying to profit maximize, but the government is trying to keep people on public transport and get them out their cars. So the guy in Milan is looking at doing a similar thing and going, right, so what barriers do we need to remove? Well, one of the things is removing the uncertainty of the cost of a trip. So they're looking at maybe pay per hourly use, regardless of what you use, or maybe a fare cap across absolutely every single form of transit. But they've still got to get those people, convince them. So they're going, well, okay, how can we now also build in a reward system to say, look, if you're a regular commuter and you go and commute into the middle of Milan every single day, if you use public transport for 3 days a week, we'll give you a free entry ticket for your family to the museum over the weekend. So, what else is going to incentivize you? Maybe we'll give you a couple of euros off your fuel for your car or your charging, so long as you're not going to use it in Milan. You know, you take that weekend day trip away with your family. But incentivize them in some way to move out of their cars into the public transport, all by using payments as a mechanism to change their user behavior and collaborating across multiple different communities. Now, to me, that is a fascinating way of bringing payments data to life in a smart city setting and environment.
I love the idea of using payments to change people's behaviors. And I think we have one question from the audience. Let me read from here because the teleprompter is very small. Can you expand on the challenges of bringing to market some of the use cases we see taking place in a non-so-distant future? Next question, what do different players, in ecosystem need to think about to make this happen? Would you like to?
It seems like a good continuation of the themes that we're talking about. And maybe if I could respond, I actually don't think the statement that you made was actually too provocative. My fundamental belief is I don't think we should fight what consumers want to do, because I think that's a losing battle. I think the real challenge is how do you equip consumers with data, with the right data they need to make informed choices. So the point around provide fair comparison, spot on. I mean, absolutely, I think that's important. There are ways today where you can see, the cost of a trip, let's say an Uber, if you provide the distance. So some of that does exist, but I think you need to provide that data up front so consumers can make that choice. But I think that's you have to meet the consumer where they are, and you have to help them make the choices in the way that's most efficient. Is personally what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, like in your example, you're actually removing friction between different ticketing systems for a customer. So making it embedded, you can position it as making it unsure what you're going to pay, but you can also position that removing friction between different silos with different ticketing systems. That's also uncertain and also a hassle. Going back to the question you just posed on the screen, I think in a lot of the use cases we discussed, interoperability between different systems is a massive challenge. Also, assuring that you have the right consent to be able to share data across ecosystems is a massive challenge. And ultimately, one of the things that I highlighted, I think having real-time payment in some of the use cases is a massive challenge. If you want to have a real-time payment today based on a non-payment device, you get into trouble, right? There's no simple ways to do that with a 100% guarantee of the payment that's frictionless and that's easy for the customer.
Yeah, maybe one more example. Actually, just prior to coming here, I was with another a software partner, and the use case we were talking about was merchant onboarding. So as a payments company, one of the things merchants want is they want to be able to board with us very quickly and start transacting, get ready to go, get their terminal, and off they go. But one of the points of friction is, well, as an acquirer, we take on that merchant's risk, and therefore we have to do a level of verification, credit verification, AML verification. There are a lot of open banking APIs now that banks exposed, where if the merchant gives consent, we're able to use those APIs and do those checks, and so boarding becomes seamless. But that's a trade-off. You need consent up front, and as many of us might sometimes think, how much friction can I live with versus how much data sharing am I going to be comfortable with? Like those are real choices. It's not just about painting the vision of, well, look, it can all be seamless. Each of us as consumers will make that decision on how much data we're comfortable sharing. So that was pretty much the discussion we were having, even just looking at this merchant onboarding use case.
Very good. Thank you for all the thoughts. I think we have an interesting one here, and I'm looking at you, Bas, for that, because we were discussing this earlier. Some nations are discussing stricter AI regulations. Does this trend suggest a move towards more centralized government control over these, I'll repeat. Some nations are discussing stricter AI regulations. Does this trend suggest a move towards more centralized government control over these smart nations' connected ecosystems?
I'm not an expert in AI regulation, so leaving that aside,
Yeah.
I do think we as a sector have an important question around privacy and around accessibility, for example. Some of the examples shown were about biometric authentication. It has to do with very personal, very sensitive data that's being stored and that's being shared. And to be honest, to me, I find it personally very difficult where you draw the line of what's accessible and what's not acceptable. But I think one of the core principles to me would be that accessibility of public transport, accessibility also, for example, of charging and charging points, even if you're not willing to share certain data types, you should still be able to access those services. And the journey may not be as frictionless as when you decide to do share your data. But I feel there should also be an option to always not share your data if that's important to you as a person.
Absolutely, and I think that where you draw the line will vary from person to person. And I think it could be even related to generations. So the younger generation, they are more at ease, I think, to share their own data than older people. So there are lots to take into account. Another question.
I'm also curious about how some of the other panelists look at this, because
I think from the point of view of relationships, it's probably easier in our world because people they're not loyal to necessarily a venue, but if they go to, say, the Isle of Wight Festival every year, there's a loyalty element which at the moment the promoters just don't know, and therefore there's no direct relationship with the person going there. They can't use that relationship to leverage their own relationship with their own commercial partners. And I'll give you an example. Particularly the Isle of Wight Festival, there's a brand called Old Moat Cider. They must spend probably £250,000 on their setup. Live stage, DJs, VIP area, probably 3,000 or 4,000 people standing outside that compound enjoying that music all day long for 4 days. Do Old Moat Cider have any relationship with those people? No, not one. And the agencies, last year I found them even taking names and addresses on a clipboard. It's crazy. So therefore there is potential better relationship, if you like, reward-wise, in my world, probably than there is in an anonymous sort of transport world.
So I just want to make a comment about AI. So the genie's out the bottle. The world has changed, and within the very near future, if you aren't already, you're going to have your own personal AI. If you're not already playing with AI, I heavily suggest you go and experiment for yourself and just see the capabilities of generative AI at the moment. But you were describing a future, and both of you were actually sort of a smart wallet-orientated future. And if you like listening to Dave Birch, come and hear him on the 21st of May at our event in Brussels, where he's going to be talking about the evolution of smart wallets to smarter wallets. And what he's implying there is that our wallets are going to be making decisions on our behalf. So I can't comment about the specific about centralized government AI-controlled smart cities, but what I do believe is that in the future, we will be represented not just by a machine, but by a smart machine. The thing that will be representing us and transacting on our behalf will have artificial intelligence baked into us. And we're already seeing, my seamless experience in a city is via my ring. And I'm not giving my finger up at everybody, it's a smart ring. So my ring presents itself as a token, but that changes depending on what I want to do. So I've got 3 cards associated with this ring at the moment. And when I'm here out of my home country, it presents as my Wise card. So my Forex is completely taken care of because it's got the best exchange rate. When I make a business transaction, it presents as my Starling business account. And when I'm in my home country and I'm doing leisure transactions, it goes over to my Monzo card. So I've already got intelligence built in the back end of this ring, and I can add 15, 20 cards there if I wanted to, with smart rules. And those rules are going to get smarter and smarter. Now, I'm using a ring, we could be using a phone, we could be using a biometric facial recognition, but the whole point is that our way to pay and glide through life is going to be represented by an artificial intelligence which will speak to the smart cities' artificial intelligence. So the world is going to be AI to AI communication on our behalf. And at the end of the day, it's going to make our lives easier. Is it going to be centralized government control? Don't know. Maybe you've been watching too many dystopian sci-fi movies.
Thank you. We have about 4 minutes left, and we have 2 interesting questions still to cover. So I'll go for the next one. Credit risk management during onboarding only uses collateral or merchant reserves today and causes massive friction. Have you seen alternative options?
Someone took my example to heart. I think it's maybe that specific question is more tangential. But I think in credit risk management, which I don't want to talk about really here, but there are always the opportunities. Data is power. When you make credit risk decisions, the more access to data to actually help assess soundness is incredibly informational. So I think the real evolution, to bring it back to this topic in credit risk management, is about how many additional data points can one get. And I think that was the use case of open banking APIs that I referenced.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Anyone would like to add anything? No? So. Another one. Don't know about this, but what changes do acquirers need to make to enable these use cases?
I can go again. Don't want to repeat too many of the themes, but I think it's not just the acquirer. I think everything across the panelists that we've talked about is the role of different players in the ecosystem. Given that I think there's broad agreement that payments data is an incredibly important part of this, I think there's a massive role that acquirers have in terms of harnessing that payment data and making aspects of it shareable. I think one of the hardest things as an acquirer is we do take on merchant risk, and therefore one of the things we always have to think about is with more and more entities in the value chain, we do have to think about ecosystem risk. We do have to think about, where is that ultimate transaction, where is that going to rest? So those are decisions we make. But from a technological standpoint, the biggest thing is around being open to integrate with different software players, integrating with different technologies, and that's sort of the area that Elavon is focused on.
Very good. One last. Yes, please.
I saw the last question. It's too hard to answer. So, but commenting on your previous point, I think for acquirers, there's also a question around. So today, acquirers process payment transactions with all the data fields that payment transactions have, right? And I think there's a huge opportunity to enrich that with more data. But it's a question, which role do acquirers want to play? Someone is going to play that role. Is that going to be the acquirer, or is it mostly going to be third parties that enrich transactions with level 3 data or other kind of transaction data?
I mean, the thing about data is today, the payments data uses the ISO standards. There are lots of unused data fields in the ISO standards. So we don't have a limitation in terms of what a payment message can contain. Yeah. It's back to a bit of an ecosystem point in terms of there's a role for networks, there's a role for acquirers to receive and pass that on to merchants, absolutely. But at least the good thing is there's no constraint from an ISO standard standpoint.
Very good. I think it would be great to wrap up. Now, thank you so much to the panelists and speakers for such an amazing overview. I love the journey through two cities in a country that's very close to my heart, Italy, with Venice, the ride through Venice, and also the example from Milan. I would like to extend a big thank you to the audience for staying with us and for offering very interesting questions for our debate. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Either you meet people, attend other conferences, or visit the exhibition. Thank you very much.